Okay, taking out your large square that was given to you, you're going to take your ruler and set it against the side of your paper with the 0, and you're going to mark at the 3-inch mark above and below and at the 6-inch mark above and below it. These are going to be guidelines for the lines that we're getting ready to create. So I just did the same thing a little bit lower on the paper. Then I'm going to flip my ruler vertically and line it up against those dots to create that line that connects the dots. Do the same thing on the other side so that you create parallel lines. Then I'm going to rotate my paper so that my lines now look horizontal. And I'm going to do the same thing at the top and bottom. I'm going to line it up, mark above the 3-inch and below it, and then above the 6 inches and below that. And slide down. And do the same thing, 3 and the 6 above and below. Now I'm going to flip my ruler and connect those lines. Try not to get confused with the lines that we just used to create the horizontal stripes. After that line, I should have 9 squares. They're 3 inches apiece. And then you're going to have your small 3-inch square to work with that I gave you guys on Friday. We're going to go from the 1/2-inch mark up to create a straight line that goes into that corner. I'm going to mark it with a Sharpie just so you all can see. You don't have to do that part. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom, except I'm going to go in and make it curve out like the one that's above as the example. So it's going to curve out a little bit and then come back to that corner. It's still going to be about an inch and a half long. So then I'm going to create this wing. We're going to be creating our birds. So we're going to go an arched line that's going to come from the corner and curve. And you can kind of adjust that first line to fit how you would like your wing to look. Then we're going to do the line that's on the back side of that. It's going to curve in and then in a little bit more to make almost a V shape that connects with the line that we created a minute ago at that same corner. So there you go. Now you're going to get your scissors out and we're going to cut these pieces off. So carefully snipping, you're going to cut and then make sure you really turn and cut nice and clean. I'm going to fix something real quick. We're going to add numbers. So you don't have to necessarily add those numbers. I just want to make sure that you understand this next step in a second. So I just numbered each side 1, 2, 3, or 4, and I'm going to use that in just a second. Okay, after all these pieces are cut out, I'm just going to be sliding. We're going to do a tessellation with a rotation. Now rotate side 2 to side 3, and side 1's going to rotate to side 4. See how that is creating that flat line from corner to corner. Line those corners up, and then you're going to tape down where they connect. And we're creating our stencil. And once it's taped on this side, I'm going to flip over and tape on the other side. And now we have a bird. So you'll be able to see this bird outline here. And we're going to use that bird as a stencil for all the birds that we put on our grid. So I'm going to start with my bird, and notice that I still have that square shape, even though I have some pieces that are going to stand out from that. So I'm going to put my lines lined up with that grid square. And then anything that's hanging over that, that's okay. I'm going to just trace around my stencil. That's it. Just leave it there where it lines up with the square and trace around. Now this is a rotation tessellation. So I'm gonna rotate my bird and it's gonna fit like a puzzle piece with the next part. So I'm gonna rotate it. I like to think about rotating that beak so that the beak fits into that area. And wherever it fits and lines up as a square, then I'm gonna trace. See how that one piece of the tail is hanging off? That's okay. That bird doesn't fit on the page fully. So that's okay. Now I'm gonna rotate that and keep the beak in that center area. You'll notice that the tops of the bird's heads are gonna come together in this section. So I'm just tracing around that, trying not to let it move, and then I'm gonna rotate, match it all up, trace, and you're gonna see some bird outlines there. Now I can erase these guidelines that you created that were on the 3 and the 6 inch marks. So we're gonna just erase those. If you lose any of your lines, you can reconnect. Now you're gonna have to notice how the tail connects with this bottom part of the bird. It's like I said, like a puzzle piece. So that piece that fits in there is the tail. And that's gonna give us another starting point for another group of birds. So I'm gonna just trace around that. And then I'm gonna rotate my bird and see where it fits with the other marks that I already have. Now I'm just adding some marks at the top of the heads, just 3 little lines that are gonna be like for those top feathers that are on top of the head on my bird. Now you can design yours however you'd like, but those are just gonna give me a heads up where the bird's top of the head is. It can get confusing when you start looking at them in a minute without any designs on them. So giving yourself that little area to notice this is the top of the head, that's gonna help you know where each bird starts. So I keep rotating and noticing where it fits in perfectly. And then you'll notice whenever you're on this side, that's gonna be an opening to rotate and put the beak in. So just slide that beak down and then finish up your tracing. For the next part, you're gonna get to do some designs on your birds. This is where you're gonna really make them individual. So you can create your bird any way you'd like, but most of the birds need to follow the same kind of design. So I tried to do 4 feathers in 3 rows or 4 rows on each of the wings, and then the same sort of eye on each bird, the same sort of tail. So you can design your own bird, but once you design one, try to keep it the same for your other birds, except for, of course, if you'd like to add some emphasis with a shape or a design, like we have on our sheets that were handed out and that will be included. You could create some different texture on one of the birds. I'm actually going to use color to help me create emphasis on mine at the very end. So all my birds are going to look very similar to each other, and then I'm going to create emphasis using color. But you're welcome to use shape, line, value, texture, or space, or color like me. So I'm just adding in these details these wings and their feathers, and then their tail feather, their eye. There's a little mark beside their eyes that I'm doing. And of course their beak. All right, next up, if you have a permanent marker, like a Sharpie, a black Sharpie, that's what I'm using, you can trace over those lines, and it's just gonna really help each design stand out and be a nice solid black line. If you don't have that, you could skip the step, or you could just use a regular marker. So I'm just going to be finishing up on my tracing here of each individual line. And then once we finish with that, I want you guys to just reference back at your emphasis sheet. And I want you to think about the different types that I mentioned just a minute ago, about shape, line, value, color, space, and texture. Like I'm pointing to here, you guys are just going to reference back to these and the examples that are in this chicken sketch that's at the top of this page. So like I said, am going to use color in my example for you. And there you go. So I have all blue birds with orange beaks except for one red bird with a yellow beak.